Sounds great. We heard about pickleball, we heard about volleyball maybe, we heard about a lot of events that are already taking place in Surrency Park that perhaps we could just enhance or provide a little bit more infrastructure for. So we've already gotten a lot of really good feedback, but we'd love to hear your ideas about that as well. And then on this board here, we sort of have a visualization of what it might look like if you were a bird flying over this park. Once it was built, what it might look like. And like Danny said, these, what we're calling rain gardens, are stormwater detention basins. So they fill up when it rains and then they slowly drain away. So there wouldn't be water in them all the time, but just after it rains, and then they would slowly percolate out.
Is there additional property gonna have to be purchased in order to do this?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
And we have assurances from those people that own that it's okay?
They told me that, yes, that they were willing to sell. Yeah. And that's just, like it shows there, you can see most of that, there's a big walking trail. There's a lot of solar lights with backup batteries. You've got, we talked about putting all kinds of things out there for the kids to play and do. It's a big area. It's a big area, and we had, I can't remember all the ideas that came up this morning, but there was a lot of good ones.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of good ones, and anyway, that just gives you a visualization of what it could possibly look like. You know, and it's really more than that, but it's just to give you an idea. It's not that, and the drainage is gonna be a natural drainage. It's not gonna be going the pipes like we thought, going through somebody's property that they found another way. So that's out of the way. We don't have to worry about dealing with that. So, I think the people that's involved with property are supposed to be here. I don't know if they're here or not. I know I will see one, and I'm sure she'll be here at 5. So you can talk with her, that's the deal. But, anyway, that's just some, if y'all have any questions about what's out there, if you can't tell, just ask them. You know, I can't remember everything, but there was a lot of suggestions, and this is your time for input, whatever you think Reidsville might need that they could use in a park. We did, let's see, talking about the cars, let's see, the mounds of the dirt, and there'll be a lot of dirt left over for the city, county if we want it, from what I understand, that, you know, we can always need. So, you know, that's just, if you ask away if you have any more questions. If not, we'll go to the next one.
Yeah.
But we've been over so much today. I
know, the mayor could probably give the spiel as well.
Yes.
I think there
That's whatever you need to, you know. Come in, sir, if you want to. You can sit down. If you want to consider. Okay.
Any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
This turns 23 or so acres into something really pretty and useful, where right now it's just flood zone. You know, it's not gonna ever nothing happen with it. So,
I think that it's gonna offer a lot of the amenities that we've been trying to get at the park for so long, for almost 3 years. They also,
I'm sorry.
they're gonna supply bathrooms, for us as a community to do it. I think they got several places where kids can do individual activities. I think it actually meets a lot of the criteria that we've been trying to get, and I'm impressed with it. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us, especially like the walking trail that we've been trying to get. So now it can be structured, and then the volleyball. I mean, there's a lot of activity. The RC track, I think, is going to grow a lot of attention to the park. And I think that's what basically we wanted, to be able to rejuvenize it, to be able to be used again like it should be, instead of just a piece of area that's just been dying down. And now I think, like I was telling you later before, I think it's just like a vitamin shot in the arms of Reidsville, because I think it's going to be very impressive when you're finished with it.
Yeah, we can move on to the Army if y'all want to. I think she had another board besides that one that shows the bigger thing. I think we like better, but anyway, she can explain it.
Sure. Okay, so on the old armory site, we in discussions with the community and the city, we have started to think about the potential future of this site as a community center. We heard this is something the community needs and is in need of, but that also this funding for this grant program really encourages the idea of a resilience hub. So a resilience hub is a place where you can serve emergency needs during a time of crisis. So for example, it could be after a hurricane, you distribute supplies, there could be extended power outage and folks need a place to come charge their phones even, or keep their medicine cold, or things like that. In extreme heat events, it could be a cooling center where folks can come and cool down and protect themselves from heat stroke. In extreme cold situations, it could be a warming center. So this could also provide monthly food distribution to folks in need. So there are a number of ways that a resilience hub can be envisioned, but the idea is that it's sort of a building that has the capability to run regardless of what else is going on. So it's got backup power, it's got redundant systems so that it can remain operational, perhaps when everybody else's power is out or other things are maybe not going great in a place. And so we've heard today alone a lot of great support for this idea, and I think what we really dug into today is both what does the community want in a community center? What do you want to be able to do there on an everyday basis? And we heard rent it out for events, potentially have family reunions, to be able to maybe bring voting here again, other types of community gatherings, a place for seniors, different kids programming, and then also what does the community or what does the county need for emergency management functions? And we got a lot of really good feedback from Walt on that today, very specific, which was helpful. So that's what we're trying to understand, because we're proposing a brand new building, so we're trying to understand how big does that have to be in order to do all those things that we want it to be able to do. So we would love to hear from you all what you would think a new community center in Reidsville should offer, and what you would want to be able to do there. And if you have feedback on the emergency operations part of it too, like what would you potentially want to be able to go there if there was a tornado or if there was a heat event or something? How would you want to be able to use this space, or what can you imagine yourself using this space for? So we definitely would love more feedback on the community center aspect of this. What do you think Reidsville needs in a community center?
Remember, we also talked about it was big enough to put a basketball court.
Oh yeah.
To do a basketball court for the kids who have somewhere to go play basketball, a covered area. And I don't know if y'all asked, I mean, the solar panels are on top. Anyway, there is room, it's big enough to have a full-size basketball court there, inside. And we can section it off. We got things that will pull and section it off. Like when people rent it, they won't need the whole big space. You know, they'll just rent sections for whatever they want. It's and we talked about, I don't know if you mentioned it, about the things that we would need during the like disasters that I know we talked about pulling the truck up to the back with the clean water, that the road would be big enough to pull in a big truck of water and back it right in. We talked about how lighted the area would be with the carriage solar lights, backup batteries, and then, like I said, it's got the solar panels on top. But we basically using that for a lot of things. Walking trail, beautiful walking trail to go on, and it's maybe some benches outside, and not having the pine trees that are there. We talked about that. Getting trees that we wouldn't have to worry about destroying stuff or keep, we'd like to see them come down. Pine trees are good like we said, in the country, but not so good in the city around homes or buildings. So we end up taking them down. But we did talk about that, and that's just some of the things I remember. Now, some of you that were here may remember something else that I don't remember. There's a lot of good uses for that building.
I have a question. I see a lot of things in there, but I don't know, is the National Guard Armory that part is it big enough for all that?
Yeah, there's a lot of acres. You're just thinking about the armory. There's stuff all around it, the back, front, around it. It goes in the back.
It's a really big site.
3.2 acres or something like that. It's a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Forgive me if this has already been established earlier today, but I love this idea. What's the time frame for this? Because it's a big project.
It's a great question. So the technical assistance design work that we're doing is really fast. We are trying to be done with this in the next month or so that we can get our application into this grant program. The grant application period is only open through November. So we've got to get our grant in before November. Then the timeline to spend the money is 3 years. So it's fast. So this is gonna happen quickly. But you're right, these are big projects, and part of what our team is working on in conjunction with the designs is spelling out the feasibility of what are all the steps. And we've already heard some of those steps. We've heard about property ownership, step 1. We've heard about, all the steps involved in demolishing a building that has asbestos in it and how long that takes, because you have to go to special landfills and you have to use special contractors and all those things take time. So thinking about how we're going to write into this grant the phasing of this work to make the EPA feel comfortable that we can get it all done in their 3-year grant period.
I got a question. The grants that you get for these projects, is hiring somebody to actually oversee this, like there's gonna be an employee there working at these sites?
It's a great question, and yes.
Because I'm looking at the buildings themselves, and that place you're talking about, laser tag or whatever that thing is, you're gonna have somebody there working as an employee. I wonder if the grant's gonna cover the salaries for these people.
During the grant period, we can write into the grant salaries to help manage these projects.
Okay.
After the grant period, the city will have to pursue additional funding for employees to maintain, program these spaces. But during the grant period, we can write in staff support for these projects.
Okay, is that like fall under the recreation department? All over the community center and?
Yes, probably would have to fall under that, but, it's, when she was, talking about the grants, how we're gonna pay them, it's gonna bring the jobs. You're gonna need a lot of people to work in these different places. And, by the time they get this started, actually to that point where you need to hire people, we will have the money. I'm not worried about that. We'll have the grants, we'll have the money, whatever we need, and it'll bring jobs. We're talking about maybe, like first of the year, maybe getting started. We gotta start thinking about hiring people to take the armory down, which we talked about this morning. And, but all of, like they said, the startup and the pay is included while the grant's going, as long as I guess the money lasts. Then the city, and hopefully the county helps, we take it over with employees because it benefits the city and the county. So, we will just get that out of grant money. I mean, that's what we're gonna use, and, we got grants waiting right now to go, just as soon as we get this audit, balanced, I hope before I leave this room today. So anyway, we will be able to fund it. I don't think that's a big concern at this point, because we're talking a couple years down the road. But this is the first step, is getting the land purchased and talking, bidding out different things for people to do, during the whole process. And I think I'll be in touch with you guys a lot, and Miss Harriet a lot, and me. I mean, that's basically who it's gonna be, and, the money will be managed, and, we'll let it go as far as it'll go. We don't know what that is until you get right into it, how much things cost. And if we can only get 2 out of the 3, then we take this one, and they'll talk to you about the 3rd one in a minute, and there's some things we can do on our own there. We'll go on to the money runs out, and maybe to pay people, whatever is what I would suggest, before we start a 3rd one, but that's a year or so down the road. We gotta get this part out of the way.
Another thing I would add to that too is that once, if we are able to secure this grant, which is a very big grant and an unprecedented amount of money, this would require a lot of building partnerships that would go into the grant writing itself. And so having those connections would help us secure additional funding down the road. So like Mayor Vicky said, Mayor Neal said, this would set us up for success.
I think too though, when some of the things that we have wanted to do for the park, I think once we get that, especially if we add additional activities and stuff like that, I think it'll start to generate its own funding. You know, like the RC pack, the people starting to come down to rent different parts of the park and stuff like that, because when I looked at it, that's a beautiful little spot that a lot of people would actually come to be a part of it. And so you got other things to rent the building, we can start doing tournaments just like the rec department. We can start doing other things to generate the funding to support it itself. Now, not a whole lot of people, but I'm quite sure we can do a skeleton crew, et cetera, and then we can just work as it goes.
That sounds great.
Do we have any idea what these things will cost, money-wise?
So we haven't done full cost estimates on them, but I think right now, the stormwater park concept, I mean, I think it's probably in the neighborhood of 10 million, including the purchase of the land, you know, hiring designers, engineers, you know, like there's many steps involved. The Armory building, I think, will depend on the final size that we end on. You know, I think it's gonna depend on the square footage of the building that we ultimately land on. And then also we were talking about just how expensive the demolition of that building has probably gotten over the last few years since the city had last gotten quotes on it. So we're gonna have to reevaluate that as well.
I know you're trying to get grants to take care of all that, but the probability is pretty slim of getting everything. So I think, I think you said that the city at some point will have some kind of responsibility for something, you know, for something depending on what they want.
That is true. And I think the grants that the EPA is trying to give out are in the ballpark of, they want the projects to be in the $10 to $20 million range. I think we're gonna go for the whole enchilada, and we're gonna try to, you know, pair at least 2 of these projects together to go for the big, you know, closer to 20. And I think, you know, I feel reasonably confident that we could do these 2 projects with that amount. I think where all of our question mark is do we have enough to be able to take on any of the streetscape work? And like you brought up, there are other feasibility concerns about timing and permitting and things like that around those. So there are other funding for that, and the city, I think, is open to pursuing other funding for that as well.
There's no matching funds that you know of that the city would have to do a percentage-wise for those grants.
This grant program does not require matching funds.
Thank you.
What's the time frame on the grant? When would it be decided?
Great question. The grant program is rolling. So it is already open, people are already applying for it, and it's rolling. And they are evaluating, I think, on a monthly basis, and awards are starting to be made. I think they were a little slow to get out of the gate, but it is rolling. So that's why our team feels a significant sense of urgency to get our designs wrapped up and get this application in so that we can get in as early as possible. And so once you get in, they evaluate and they let you know. So it is.
Are you in competition with other places for that grant, or we just get it or don't get it? I mean.
Oh, well, that's also a good question. The EPA, they're doing things differently on this grant program because, number one, they're bypassing the states. States cannot apply for this funding, which is great because they're trying to get the money closer to the ground. They're trying to get the money closer to communities. This grant program is only available to communities that are determined to be disadvantaged and disaster prone. And so you guys meet that criteria, and you're already, the fact that EPA already selected you for technical assistance sort of is a good sign that we're well on our way for that bigger grant program. But there's no set aside per se. So we are in competition with other folks who are applying for this, but the other part of this is that the sooner we get our application in, the EPA, if they don't select you, you get an opportunity to get feedback from them and resubmit. So that's another reason why we want to get this application in early, because, you know, if for some reason there's something that they're like, oh, I wish you had said this in a different way, then there's an opportunity to revise the application and turn it in again. So, but we feel really good about these projects. We feel like they're checking the major boxes that the EPA is looking for on this grant program, which are climate resilience strategies. And I think we've got those very well covered in both of these. We've got a climate resilience hub / community center, and we're mitigating flooding for a community on this side. The other part of it is they're looking for pollution reduction as part of these designs. And I think we're doing that in a number of ways as well. We're treating stormwater before it passes on down to your river and water bodies. We're also hopefully dealing with air quality in this future building and mitigating indoor air quality. We're also cleaning up a contaminated site and removing asbestos and other environmental contaminants. So I think these projects are really shoo-ins. They're made for this grant program in a lot of ways. And I think the turnout that we've already had from the community and the amazing feedback we've gotten is another really great, compelling part that the EPA wants to see, is that communities are bought in, that they want these things, and that they, have been involved in the process. Tracey, do you want to bring in that downtown board? We'll talk about that quickly. So we also looked at downtown, and we just looked at this one stretch of Main Street in what we are thinking about as like a template or a typology for a streetscape that could be applied anywhere in Reidsville or in other downtowns, but as sort of a set of best practices. When we were here a couple months ago, we heard a lot about aging infrastructure, and that Reidsville has a lot of infrastructure needs. Sewer, storm drain lines, and that there are plans in the works, but just need the money to be able to do a lot of these upgrades. And so knowing that that is coming and knowing that that is needed, we started to think about a one dig project. A one dig project is, if you're gonna dig up the road to put in a new sewer line, let's envision what you want that road to look like when you put the road back and what else it could do. And so we had heard about drainage issues, that there is only a drain line, I think, on one side of Main Street, and how to deal with some of that nuisance flooding. So we started thinking about bump outs that could be rain gardens, that could also function as places to put trees, repairing the sidewalk, putting in new lights that could be solar powered, benches, trash cans, just a general redo of the streetscape in order to enhance and revitalize some of the downtown streets. So again, trying to do multiple things every time we dig something up. So put in infrastructure and then put back the street the way that the community wants it. So we love your input on this as well, and I think this is one that, if we can ever bend GDOT to our will, it's through the input of the community saying, this is what we want our street to look like. And so I think the more input that the city could go back to them with, like, no, this is how residents of Reidsville want our downtown to look, that only helps bolster the case.
You mentioned doing 2 out of the 3 projects if you needed to cut costs. So the stormwater park, the armory site, and the streetscape, those are the 3 distinct projects.
Yes.
Assuming that you can't do all 3, which is gonna get axed first?
I think the streetscape would be the one that would not go in, and that's because we think there are other funding avenues for that type of work. And we feel good that there are other grants out there that could support that type of work. And again, that's partly a feasibility thing with being able to permit a GDOT project in the amount of time that the grant would allow. Permit and build.
So with the streetscape project, one thing that's missing on there are the electrical lines that are running right down South Main Street. So are you looking at something that we would be burying those lines, or is that all part of this?
We proposed in this drawing burying those power lines. We thought, if we're digging up the street, why not bury them? Like, that would be my pie in the sky, my big dream vision would be that we'd be able to bury them in this scenario, but.
That'll help. We won't have trucks running into the telephone poles anymore.
Right.
Take them out.
Mm-hmm. questions about any of these? Or you're welcome to just come chit chat with us and give us your feedback one-on-one.
I think the discussion came, that we had today where, and that's something that we all need to actually take a look at, for the streetscape is it feasible for us to, put the Band-Aid on it rather than to actually restructure it? But number one, I mean, there's certain things on there, like our sidewalks ain't, I mean, if we look at us, we see our sidewalks are not that big to actually generate a picture like that. But there are certain things that we can do. I mean, the trees don't have to be that big, or we can put them in the pots instead of trying to bury them and stuff like that. So there's some things that we can do to get it as close to that. But if we look at those buildings, is it feasible for us to try to decorate buildings that are not structurally sound or that are hosting roaches and rats and stuff like that? If you go into some of those buildings is just condemned inside. So when we picture that, we need to actually look at it and think about what, if we do get this grant for this part, what are we gonna do to actually communicate to the city that we sitting up here and we doing this way, but when we get time to do it, then there is no funding for it, because if you think about it, to even tear down a building like that, it's gonna take a chunk out of the grant money. So what are we gonna do with that? Are we gonna try to rejuvenize something that looked rough? Or are we gonna, and don't get me wrong, now I know a lot of y'all grew up in them buildings and stuff. Y'all went to all kind of theater and all kind of stuff in these buildings. But is it feasible for us to knock them all down, spread it out, build it back up, where it's economically feasible for us to actually use that area? If you go to other towns, you'll see where that's what they've done. If you're gonna restart something, restart it the whole way, and then that way when you build it up, now you've got new ground where you got infrastructure that's gonna be feasible to do more stuff. You know, like even telephones go from 5 to 4 to 6 to 10. Are we gonna be able to grow? Or are we saying now that we wanna put a Band-Aid on this and not be able to grow? So we had to ask ourselves that question. So when they go back, are they gonna say, well, we can we can put a Band-Aid on this and use this, or are we gonna be able to say we wanna get rid of that and start from scratch and build it on up? So we can use it 20, 30, 40 years down the road. So that's the only question that I had to ask. You know, what would be the best route for us to do?
I got a question about it. Mr. Armstrong, what he's talking about, I understand what he's talking about. Does the grant even have, is there money in that grant that says you can go in there and buy these buildings that are abandoned and people won't take care of them? Or is that something we have to do as a city, I understand, in the process of taxing them because they're not using those buildings because they're abandoned and most of them are completely dilapidated and need to be bulldozed down. So does the grant money also allowed to be used to buy those buildings that are not being utilized from these people who think they belong? They think these buildings are made out of gold. I never seen any buildings in my life in a town that think they are so expensive to buy. I mean, is that part of the grant money? Can that be used for that?
So what we were proposing for the streetscape is just the right of way. We're
So
not proposing anything related to the building.
So then basically it falls on the city. Impose an ordinance or a rule of law,
Right.
that you get your building cleaned up,
Yeah.
or we are gonna condemn it, and then we're gonna take it and bulldoze the darn thing down, and then we can revitalize our downtown section.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can write into the grant money procurement of the land for the stormwater park, because we're going to use it for that, for the function, for the community climate resilience function of mitigating flooding. I think if we had proposed a project to do something to these downtown buildings, then we could have proposed something like that. But I think alone, that would not be the best candidate for this grant.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If I could make a comment, I used to work with UDOT, and for a while I was project manager for streetscape projects that we did. And not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, by enhancing that right of way, it encouraged the use of these buildings. Some of them may be torn down and rebuilt, but that stretch. And a lot of these towns that, and I've seen this over and over, where historic areas have been pretty much replaced, you lose that air of attraction by being a historic area. You don't see it much here, but up in North Georgia, a lot of your little towns, that Clayton is a good example. The fact that it's a whole historic area attracts a lot of people to it, and I don't know that that'll ever happen here, but by enhancing that street and making it attractive for somebody to walk up and down, you may bring in business back into some of these buildings. Even the area where the building is, if it's too far gone to fix, they may tear it down, build a new one there. But it at least makes that area more attractive for business and for people to come to use that.
Exactly, and that is what we would hope that this investment would hopefully spur. And I think that's the debate we are having all day, really, is about exactly what you just said, that there's a historic character to some of these, and people like that when they drive through a downtown, and what is that? But perhaps, like, what is the expense to rehabilitate the buildings? So we were debating, I think there are lots of, pros and cons to both approaches on this one. It's a tricky situation, but we heard a lot of frustration that these buildings are very lovely part of the historic fabric of the town, and that nothing's really happening with them, and it doesn't sound like there's a lot of willingness to move the properties to maybe folks who would be willing to do something with them. So we did hear a lot of that today.
We've already had a person here already would put actually Parker's would have been here already, except for the fact what he's talking about. The people that own it wouldn't get rid of it at all, so that's the factor for some of that other stuff.
Yeah.
I don't want to change stuff, but I want to ask a brief question because you came across preservation. We have a historic hotel in town. Is there grants available for that historic hotel that you know, or maybe you can find the answer out for me and let me know?
Yeah, I'll certainly let you know. Yeah.
And it would fall into this deal with the trees and other stuff like that. It could be done very well. But if you could just check that.
Yeah,
for me.
we'll look into that. I mean, we're from New Orleans, so
Yes, ma'am.
there's a lot of historic
It's on the
preservation
historic
that goes
register.
on in our town. So
Yeah, it's on the historic register. This
Great.
hotel is. So,
Okay.
but we can't find any funds. Maybe you can.
we will look into that.
Yes, the streetscape, the way I understood, this is the third proposal. you
Correct.
say.
Mhm.
So there may not even be money to get this far. So
Correct.
in my opinion, if you focus on the first proposal and the second one,
Mhm.
is where our focus needs to be at.
Yes.
And then if
agree.
we have any money left, we focus on the third.
Correct.
So I
Correct.
think,
She said that's what they're gonna do.
okay.
Yeah, that's our plan. However, we want to leave you with your vision of
Right,
downtown
it's
as well, so that you
Oh, I
have
like
that for
this.
so that you have that for going after other funding. So we want to make sure we get that right too, even if we're not able to put it in this grant application. We want to leave you with that ready to go.
But I know I'm not talking too much, guys. I just got so much because I'm really excited. But my question is, I know we prioritizing the 1 and the 2, and then left over 3, right? But let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. Oh no, sit it back up. Okay. In order to get to this.
I love when I don't have to work anymore.
In order to get
Somebody else can do it.
and I'm being honest, in order to get to this, we got to go past this. people drive through Reidsville, they see that. So what do? They keep riding, because downtown has nothing to offer mentally in their brain cells. So if we don't do something with this right here, most people probably won't even try to find this. Think about it. They won't, I mean, because if they see how bad this looks, they don't have the money for this. So that's why I was just concerned about that. And when we make choices, let's not just throw the streetscape out the door because we really need it. I went to the conference in Valdosta. That's what basically we talked about. It wasn't about all the other amenities that Reidsville have. It's about what people see as they drive through. That red light is a tunnel point for all kind of traffic. We'll be amazed at how many people go through that red light. But when they go through that red light, and that's a pretty picture now, because that don't look nothing like what they see. What do? Even if they just driving through, in their mind, they like, well, Reidsville is not a place I need to come back to. You see what I'm talking about? So, again, that's just me now.
So Ernest, one of the things that you heard the mayor talking about over the last couple of meetings is a vacancy tax.
Oh, yeah.
And right now, we've got a bunch of vacant buildings over there, and there's no reason, nobody's pushing to get them rented and everything. In order to get these things cleaned up, you need to get them so that they're rentable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that may also come out of that push to have a vacancy tax, to get the owners of those buildings incited to actually go and do something and, clean up their buildings and get them rented and everything. And then that leads us to what you're talking about, having more, an area that's at least pleasant to the eye as you're driving into Reidsville. Right now, a bunch of vacant buildings don't look great.
And they're actually being used for storage. Right now, we go to these buildings on our main street, if a fire marshal or somebody go through it, they'll be condemned. Mm-hmm. We know that. And some of them, like right there on that corner, Sanchez bought the building, but he's in Florida. So these people are not as concerned as we are about our city. So we have to, by sitting here, we have to start making real hardcore decisions about our city. That's right. And what other people are doing for or to our city. And that's why I'm just trying to get you to start thinking not just one way, but optional when you make a decision. Peter, you had something? Oh, I'm sorry.
City of Reidsville got the first, before we go to all three steps, we have to get hardcore law in the city. Anybody on the street property, they have to understand that they have a mandatory responsibility to keep those buildings clean, secure, and safe. If they do not, then City of Reidsville have a right to take over that building. I don't care who's there on there. Nobody above the law. They have to follow this criteria if they want to keep that building on their premises. If they do not follow that, City of Reidsville not only tax is $200, $500, they can pay and keep going. And you see so many people. This Reidsville cannot be look at the Glanville, look at this, even Coptown looking better than us. Coptown looking better than us. It makes me wonder. I own the 3 places in this Reidsville. I've been telling since last 10 years, we gotta do hardcore. You send them notice. If you do not, I will on my rent bulldozer and coming to you, buddy. This is how it goes. You cannot change it by pleasing. You have to have hardcore law in the city of Reidsville. That's the only way you can go to the first picture. Before you want to go to second and third, forget about it. That's all dreaming. First, we gotta take care of this situation first. Once you do the first notice, second notice, third notice, you got JCB is gonna be there door.
I agree.
That's the best way to do it. If I own the abandoned building, what they gonna do? $500 tax? Okay, I keep going, no problem. No, this is not way to work. If you wanna clean and if you wanna make it right, this city, and it looks beautified, you have to have a hard decision on it. Otherwise, it's not gonna happen.
I got one more question. Do we have on the grants, are we allowed to pick which one we would like to go for first, like Mr. Armstrong and him was talking about? The downtown is the area that we have the biggest eyesore, which is something that needs to be cleaned up. Do we have the right, as far as the grants go, that we say we want to start out with our downtown section, the proposed streetscape to be our first priority when it comes to getting the grant money to fix? Can we do that, or we have to go to something else?
You can't. You
can't?
can't say that
You
to
can't.
us, because we're your landscape architects and we are your grant writers. However, we have read this 135-page document backwards and forwards about what the selection criteria is and what the EPA is looking to fund in these grant programs. And I think our recommendation, after reading that, both based on the feasibility of the time and the permitting, and also the criteria of these grants, the climate resilient strategies, the pollution reduction strategies, I think the streetscape is probably not the best fit for the grant program because of the criteria, the way it's written. And that is where our recommendation has come, that these other two we think are very compelling and are meeting the requirements of the grant in a way that's very compelling. I mean, the other thing that we have to say is that the EPA has asked us to break out the budgets very clearly. So the EPA might look at this grant, we might put both of these in there, and they might say, this old armory site turning into a resilience hub looks great, we wanna fund this, we don't wanna fund this North Water Park. Or vice versa, they're able to sort of say, oh, this part looks great, we wanna fund this, we don't wanna. So there is a little discretion on their end to say.
Well, personally, I think the streetscape should be number one and Army number two, because that's the two biggest eyesores we got in Reidsville. The other two things is something you've actually go in and build and erect. We've already got a start with those two projects, those two pieces of property already, is the downtown and the Army, it's already there. That other stuff, you got to go. And like you said, you could probably spend $15 to $20 million back on it.
Yeah.
We'll just see how far the money goes.
Okay?
So they got the most important part.
Okay.
I wanna say
Thank you
that
very
we're
much.
gonna be here after the council meeting as well to continue these conversations, so please make sure you come talk to us after the regular council meeting as well.
Yeah.